ever too late to do the right thing and support this bill. Thank you, Mr. President. I'd yield the floor.
Mr. President, China is no doubt a communist country. It's also the largest population on Earth, which means it's the largest consumer market on Earth. It's a growing economy, though it's had a significant slowdown in the previous couple of years. But it's a $400 billion market for the United States currently in our trade. And it's a significant place of trade dealing with agriculture in particularly. We have a lot of issues and differences with China, but we should be able to work out those differences long-term as we do with every other nation. We've got to be able to resolve some of these things, and I'm proud that the administration is full force taking on the issue of China. Every administration over the past couple of decades has tried to be able to work out some kind of ongoing conversation with China in trade, and all of them have been successful, some, but with significant issues still prevailing. This administration has had a singular focus on trade, on dealing with China, in trying to resolve those issues with them, and I hope it is successful long term. But I would hope that we would be very specific in how we actually handle that strategy, that at the end of it, we're still open in trading and we're reducing some of those barriers. It is a communist country. It doesn't always play by the rules. It also uses some of the rules to its own advantage in ways that's unlike any other country. For instance, when they joined the WTO, the World Trade Organization, they self-declared themselves as a quote-unquote developing nation. Developing nations are able to waive a lot of the World Trade Organization rules because they're developing. May I remind this body that China is the second largest economy in the world, second only to ours. They're not a developing nation, but they've used the rules of WTO to be able to call themselves developing, to not have to live up to an international standard of basic trade. On March the 22nd of 2018, President Trump signed a memorandum of action by the United States related to what's called a 301 investigation. They're targeting what the White House called economic aggression from China. Let me give you some specifics of that. China uses joint venture requirements on any foreign investment, that they want to have an ownership in those companies actually doing business there. They put pressure on technology firms to be able to transfer their technology to China if they're going to actually sell to China. The result of that is they may not take the product that is manufactured there, that those original companies sell back to the United States, but they'll take that information and then actually sell to other parts of the world from that stolen information from a technology transfer. It is akin to that China maintains unfair licensing practices. Typically in other parts of the world, our intellectual property that we have is guarded by that nation, or that we actually have a licensing agreement with them that's a fair market value. Not so with China. They put pressure on entities and actually cheat and steal our intellectual property at times. Now, it doesn't happen to every company, but especially certain types of firms, where long-term China wants to be able to produce it on their own rather than buy it from other countries. If that production is done in China, China will take the intellectual property in the plans clearly to be able to then take that intellectual property and use it for themselves in the days ahead. China is notorious for supporting cyber intrusions, to be able to go take the information that they can't get, especially from American companies or Western companies. If there's a design that they're interested in, whether that be an airplane or whether that be 3D printing or whatever it may be that's designed somewhere else, they reach in and try to be able to hack and steal it. This is not recent. This has gone on for quite a while. In 2014, the Department of Justice indicted 5 Chinese military hackers for cyber espionage against multiple United States corporations. Recently, in 2017, the Department of Justice charged 3 Chinese nationals with hacking and theft of trade secrets, and it goes on and on and on. Just in the past couple of weeks, the World Trade Organization has agreed with the United States in our complaint against China and how they handle agriculture subsidies. Agriculture subsidies from any country are limited in that country, but China uses large ag subsidies to their farmers and ag companies to be able to subsidize those products with state taxes. Let me give you an example of that. 32% of the return for rice in China is a government subsidy back to rice farmers. Now, I've had folks say, well, the United States government, we also have a farm program, we have a farm bill, we provide subsidies as well. That is true. but our rice farmers have a 2% subsidies. Chinese rice farmers have a 32% subsidy. The World Trade Organization agreed with us on this, and they've determined that China is in violation and the United States can retaliate back on that. China's using that policy and abusing that policy of subsidizing, but it's causing not only problems in China and with trade with China and their pricing of what they sell for, but it's also causing prices and uncertainty worldwide. Let me give you, for instance, cotton farming. Oklahoma's big in cotton farming. But China has over-subsidized cotton for years to their cotton farmers, and so they're overproducing what they need or what they can sell. And currently, 60% of the world's cotton supplies are stacked up in China, just in piles, not being used anywhere, but because China is subsidizing people to be able to produce it, they're overproducing it in mass quantities. They have nowhere to be able to send it, and they're just stacking cotton up in piles. The same thing in wheat. 40% of the world's wheat supplies are currently piled up in stacks in China. That destabilizes worldwide wheat prices, worldwide cotton prices, because no one knows what China is going to do with that massive stack. And WTO has considered them to be in violation for that, and we're allowed to be able to reach back and retaliate. The United States is not the only one watching China's trade policies and how they actually interact in the subsidies they do. Much of the rest of the world sees the same issue with China. And they would engage with us more to be able to cooperate, to be able to push back on China. But currently, we have so many steel and aluminum tariffs on our friends around the world that they're not engaging with us to the level they could to be able to have a clear focus against China. We need to be able to not isolate our friends, but gather friends, and to be able to say China and their policies clearly are a worldwide issue, and it needs to be resolved. Worldwide collaboration is going to be the only way that we're going to really isolate an economy as large as China. And I would encourage our administration to resolve trade issues worldwide and resolve tariff issues with our friends worldwide. And instead of saying it's a national security threat with Canada and Mexico and others, and so we need to have steel and aluminum tariffs, see the real national security threat that we have from China, and to be able to gather a cooperative group and to be able to focus in that one area. One of those areas is what's called those 301 tariffs that I had mentioned before. Any tariffs that go into place must first and foremost not hurt American consumers and American companies and American workers. My concern is the 301 tariffs, as they have grown, will hurt and are hurting currently American consumers, American employees, and American companies. The 301 tariffs these are products that are manufactured in China. They're often designed so the engineering, the marketing, all of those things, the design of those, the intellectual property is here in the United States. But as companies in the United States look for manufacturing expertise, they find expertise in certain types of products like electronics, lighting, other things where there's a lot of that manufacturing and expertise in China. So it's a natural thing to be able to say there's a large body of groups and individuals and technology that's already there to do it. Let's do the manufacturing there, but the design and engineering here. It makes sense just on a supply chain function. This administration's laid down tariffs. So far, 3 different tiers of tariffs. The first tier, every American company was allowed to be able to say, is there any other place that can do it, and to be able to ask for exclusions through that process. If they could find exclusions, they could petition the government, get out of them. The second tier, they were also allowed to be able to ask for exclusions through the process and to ask for basically a waiver to say this is the best place to do it, there's no other competition, there's no one pressuring us not to be able to do it here. But when the third and largest tier came out, $200 billion in products, no exclusion process was given for these American companies. A 10% tariff was laid down on these companies. And here's what that means. If you're a company that produces a consumer electronic or a lighting or one of the other resources that's manufactured in China, most of the people you're selling it to, you made a contract a year or 2 ago what the price would be. Whether you're selling to Lowe's or Home Depot or Walmart or Best Buy or wherever it may be, you made that deal of how much you're going to sell that product for and how much you're going to sell. Now with a 10% tariff laid down, who pays that tariff? Well, it's certainly not going to be the end user initially, because the contract has already been made. It's not going to be the Chinese manufacturing location. It's going to be those companies that are actually doing production here in the United States. The American workers and the American companies pay the brunt of all those. And by the way, there's no way to file an exemption on this group. And for $200 billion worth of products, Americans are actually facing the brunt of that. So far, Americans have paid $12 billion in tariffs. It's not punishing the Chinese, it's punishing us. And by the end of the year, if this continues, those contracts will have run out and they'll be repricing consumer electronics products all over the country, and the American consumer will be the one to be able to pay higher prices on this. 301 tariffs disproportionately hurt those that are in the middle class and those that are in poverty that have very fixed incomes. This needs to be resolved. First and foremost, there needs to be a way to be able to have a waiver process. As we have done in the first two sections, there's no opportunity to be able to get out of them in this third and largest group. It is a reasonable thing to American companies to say, how can we actually produce this? I've partnered with Senator Coons here in the Senate and Representatives Kind and Walorski in the House. And we've put together a basic bill dealing with the import tax relief, dealing with this 301, laying down for the first time how we would actually manage tariffs in the days ahead and what exclusion process that there would be and has to be. It is a reasonable thing to be able to have a predictable level to be able to benefit the American consumer, especially those who are in poverty and fixed incomes, and to be able to benefit American companies and American workers. We cannot have tariffs on a foreign country that actually hurt American workers. That's an issue we've got to still resolve. And I'm glad to be able to have partnership with Senator Coons to be able to work on that, and we hope to be able to get that done this year to be able to guard American workers for the future. But along with that, in any trade negotiations that we have what's called trade promotion authority. We have basic standards that we put into. Let me give you an example of this. Environmental concerns. We don't want to work with another country that's ignoring all environmental concerns. We're concerned about where we are in the environment, the air we breathe, the water we drink. That's important to those of us that, as Americans, because we want to be able to protect our families. We understand it does push up the cost of some products, but the long-term benefit is greater. And we're very careful in the way that we evaluate that in our regulations. When we over-regulate and it drives up cost, we push back on that and to say we don't want to over-regulate and drive up costs, but we do want to have clean air and clean water. Chinese, not so. Many areas of China, you can't breathe. And on a regular daily basis, people wear masks over their face because of the exhaust, because of the fumes, because of the toxic air they breathe, based on their limitations on environmental quality with air. It's becoming a worldwide issue because of the amount of trash that the Chinese are allowing to be able to go into the Pacific Ocean and filling the Pacific Ocean with plastic and with trash. Part of our Trade Promotion Authority and one of the agreements we have is we're going to lean in and have a dialogue with individuals that we do trade with to say we want to resolve trade issues, but we also want to be able to protect our environment, and we think that's a reasonable thing to do. It's a reasonable thing to do as well as an American that we have a high value on religious liberty and human rights. It is part of our Trade Promotion Authority. In fact, an area that I work very hard to get implemented to have as a part of our Trade Promotion Authority that when we negotiate with countries on trade issues, we also deal with the basic issue of human rights and freedom of religion. We as Americans believe your religious belief is your most precious private property, and no government should be able to just step in and to be able to steal your private property. Your most private possession is your faith. Every individual should have the right to have any faith they choose, be able to change their faith, or to have no faith at all. That should be their choice. But that's not so in China right now. In fact, in 1999, the State Department designated China as what's called a country of particular concern. It deals with the issue of religious freedom in their country and about China's aggressive move to be able to limit religious freedom in their country. They've worked, of recent, the President Xi has worked towards what they call secularization of religion, to try to make everything in the country of every area equal and the same, stripping away religious symbols from buildings of all types, stripping away religious practice that is not approved by the government of China. This discrimination has impacted Tibetan Buddhists, Muslims, Protestants, Catholics, Falun Gong practitioners. It's led to the destruction of houses of worship. It's led to evictions and demolition of religious educational institutions, restrictions in practice of study of faith by people of whatever culture or language, restriction of religious attire, religious rituals, imprisonment of religious leaders and followers. In fact, right now we're tracking through an imprisonment of a pastor named Pastor Saw. Pastor Saw, his wife is an American citizen, and his children are American citizens. He's allowed to have legal residency here in the United States. But 2 years as of this month, he was imprisoned in China. Pastor Saw has a hearing coming up on the 22nd of this month. And we hope for Pastor Saw and for his family that that hearing happens, because it's been postponed again and again and again. On the 22nd of March, we anticipate the Chinese government will have his hearing and will give him a moment for have this finally resolved. There's no reason for Pastor Saw to be in prison right now. We don't want to see in China forced re-education facilities, intimidation, lack of medical attention to people of faith. We'd love to see for the people of China what people worldwide have the opportunity to be able to have: freedom of religion. And in our trade conversations, we think it's highly advisable to be able to engage in that type of dialogue. And for people like Pastor Saw, his children are looking forward to holding him in their arms again, and for him to be able to be released. China is an important part of a worldwide conversation. They're a powerful nation. We should be able to work together on key issues. But the Chinese government needs to determine how they're going to trade, and if they're a developing country or if they're really a worldwide leader. We need to determine how we're going to do fair trade with them. And they need to determine who they're going to be on the world stage dealing with human rights and dignity. This is not all about sameness of a world. This is about the power of the individual within a country. I'm sure the people of China are very proud of their country. We'd love to engage with the people of China and would appreciate their engagement with us as we receive thousands of Chinese students and visitors every single year. This is a point where we should resolve the trade issues that have been lingering for decades now, and we hope that we can get to a right agreement. From our administration being attentive that the tariffs don't hurt our own citizens, for the Chinese economy that's slowing down due to the trade conversation that we have ongoing, let's work towards the benefit of all of our people and see if we can resolve trade issues together. With that, Mr. President, I yield back.
There are many reasons to care about our federal judiciary. It touches all of us in our everyday lives, even though we often fail to appreciate